Right now I am sitting on top of this really cool, mountain made of boulders out here in Joshua Tree National Park. And I don't know if you can see or get a sense of scale, but pretty high up. It's a really cool spot to watch the sunset. I was just doing a little reading over here. But it's been about a year since I've been out here in Joshua Tree, and it made me think about making a video about an experience that I had last year while I was living out of the Honda Civic. And it was one in which I came out to Joshua Tree for a little bit. I was working remotely. I decided to just stay out here for about 2 weeks and kind of do a little live-work thing from a national park out of a tent. And I just wanted to share that with you because it was a really cool experience for me. It was a very special experience for me. And it really got my mind thinking about what's possible in terms of living out of a car and finding a place to stay. Yeah, so that experience, at the time, I was doing jobs like driving for Lyft and Uber, still living out of my car as well. And I had a friend that had just launched an online business, and he posted on social media asking if there was anybody that wanted to help him out, just fulfill orders and do some basic stuff, because it had gotten busy enough where he needed to focus more on the marketing and the computer-based work, and he needed somebody to help ship things out and fulfill. So I answered that and I started working for him, and we were just working out of his bedroom, which was really cool. But once things kind of got a rhythm and I figured out, what the workflow was, I realized that as long as I had the supplies that I needed, I could pretty much do that job from anywhere. And so I thought it would be a really cool idea to go somewhere, go on an adventure, be out in nature, and still be able to get the work done. So I did a little bit of research into what it costs to stay at a national park and how long you could actually be there. I believe in pretty much any national park, but at least Joshua Tree, you can stay there for a maximum of 30 days consecutively, and the price of a campsite, a first come first served campsite, is $15 per night. So I don't know the math exactly, but I think that's $400 per month. So I took that figure and I kind of figured that would be my monthly rent. And, my backyard would be this amazing place that I'm in right here. So I packed up my car, I got all the supplies in it, and I drove out to Joshua Tree hoping to find a campsite and to set everything up and then just work out of my tent. But when I got here, I realized that because it's such a popular national park, there were actually no campsites available, and I couldn't set up. So what I ended up doing was I went to what's called BLM land, which is the Bureau of Land Management. Basically, it's public land that anybody can, for free, just go and camp on. However, there are no toilets, there's no amenities at all. It's just literally a plot of land. I had actually brought a really big tent so that it could fit this desk that I had. And it was so windy that it ended up breaking the tent. Luckily, I had a backup tent that was really small, and I set that up for the night, and it didn't blow over. It worked out okay. The next day, I went to look for a site again, and there was nothing available. Once again, I think I was there on a Wednesday or Thursday. And so I was out of luck, and I went into the town of Joshua Tree, and instead of going through the hassle of going into the park looking for a campsite every day, I simply rented a motel room. What's kind of unfortunate here in the US is that even the cheapest, dinkiest, most run-down motel that you can find is still easily $60 a night. The one that I paid for in Joshua Tree, which is, not a super busy town or anything, was $80 a night. And so I ended up staying there. Part of the reason I ended up staying there for, I think, what was a whole week was because I realized that in the park there's no cell phone reception, or there's hardly any cell phone reception. And I don't know, I didn't anticipate that. I knew maybe it would be spotty, but I didn't realize that the park would have virtually no reception at all. And I needed cell phone reception because in order to see which orders were coming in for the day, which customers bought which items, I needed to use an app on my phone. And unless I had some kind of cell connection, I couldn't get updates as to the new orders that were arriving. So I stayed in this really crappy motel, and I stayed there because I at least had Wi-Fi and I could get settled while I did some research. So I used it as my home base. I paid way too much money for it. but that's kind of what I had to do once I got here. So I should say that one of the reasons I didn't reserve ahead of time, I think, was twofold. One was that it was about October, I think, which is when it finally starts to cool down in the park. And that's the busy season, so there were pretty much no sites available to reserve. But even if there were sites readily available, I had come to Joshua Tree because it's one of the best places in California to go rock climbing. And this particular campground that you see behind me is called Hidden Valley, and it is probably the main base for most rock climbers out here. So I wanted to be here specifically. So anyways, I was at this motel. I had set up everything, I brought the supplies, and I was working out of there for a week, and at the same time I was doing research on how I could find a campsite. I learned a couple of things, a couple of tips for anybody that's looking to get into a national park and it's busy and there's no spots available. I ended up coming here at like 7 in the morning before a lot of people started to wake up, and I would park my car at the entrance of the campground and then get on foot and check out each campsite. Now, on each campsite, at the front of it, there's a wooden post where a camper has to attach a piece of paper that shows what day they've checked in and for how many nights they're staying. So I would go around to each campsite and I would look for a post that said that the people camping there were going to leave that morning. I picked out a couple of sites. I found maybe like 3 or 4 where the people were leaving that day. And then I kind of just waited around, took a walk. And when I started to notice people getting up and, opening their tents and putting stuff in their car, I would go and ask them if they wouldn't mind that I just quickly put on my piece of paper that shows that I'm gonna stay there, and just swap it out. Usually what people do is they'll drive around in their cars and they'll drive past each campsite, and if the campsite looks full, most people will just assume that it's occupied and that they can't take it. But if you know that the people are going to leave that day because you actually checked the piece of paper, then you can get ahead of those cars and just kind of sneakily grab a site for yourself and reserve it in a way. So I did that, finally had a campsite, set up my tent, which was, I think, like a 4-person tent. I had the supplies that I needed, and I had a workbench that just fit inside the tent. Now again, I had a huge tent, like a 10-person tent that I was expecting to set up this bench on, but because I had to switch and use this smaller tent, it pretty much took up all the real estate inside. So if you can imagine, I had this tent, had this long desk spanning across of it with a bunch of supplies on it, and I had just enough room for my body to like lay next to the bench or the table each night to go to sleep. That was my setup. Now, if you recall, I said that I needed cell phone reception, and it was a problem in this park. There was one day that I was hiking around, I was scrambling up all these rocks, kind of like what I did to get up here. And when I came back down, I looked at my phone and I realized that I had all these updates, like text messages that had come in and order updates that we had for work. And I thought to myself, like, I wonder how I got all these updates. Like, I've been in the park and I don't know where I got reception. And then I thought about it and I was like, the only place that it could have happened was that little hike that I did where I climbed on top of these mountains. Maybe there's enough cell reception when you get to the top that you can get all these, updates, your texts and your orders and stuff. So I hiked back up and I realized that on top of places like this where I am again, and those mountains, like you can see right there, if you were to go to the top of that, you actually get cell reception, and just enough so that you can, see all the updates that you need. So imagine I'm in this tent, I have barely enough room to sleep, and every morning I wake up, and in order to start work, I go and take a hike up one of these mountains and then sit there for about 10 minutes while all the orders download. And then every day I would fulfill all of these orders, right? And I'd have to take them to the post office in order to ship them out to the customers. So I would just put them in a bag in my car and then drive to the Joshua Tree post office, drop them off for the day, and then come back here, go on a hike, go climbing. It was kind of a grind. There were even a number of days where I had to drive back home because we had, this was the start of a small business, so things were just kind of ramshackle and improvised, And so we had shipments of supplies that were coming in at very irregular times. And so I would actually have to drive back to LA, Los Angeles. And, you know, it's 2.5 hours and about, what is it, like 150 miles each way, I think. So I used up a lot of gas, a lot of time. It was quite an experience, but what I can say about it was, despite all of the hassle and the improvising, it was such a great experience, because I remember, like, I would go back to LA, I would pick up supplies. Some days I would come back to Joshua Tree on the same afternoon, and then I would start driving back at night. And I just remember driving into the park. You know, it's dark, the moon's out, there's like a bunch of stars in the sky, no one's on the road. You just are in this dark car with your headlights on, listening to music. And I would have the sunroof open, so you'd get all this wind coming in, and it was just a very surreal, serene feeling to like have this unique experience that, you know, most of the time you don't really get to enjoy. But I would be coming into the park at like 2 a.m. in the morning, and it was so amazing. And then every day when I would wake up, you know, I would go and drink some water, go use the restroom, and it was just so nice to like walk over to the restroom 8 in the morning before I went to work or started work. And it's just, you're surrounded by nature, you're surrounded by mountains, by the desert. Again, like I mentioned, this is a climbers campground basically, so like all these really cool climbing people would be like fishing things out of their truck to get ready to go climbing, and they're all super friendly, you know, asking me if I was going climbing and, you know, how's the day going, and offering to, you know, share some coffee. Just, it's a cool vibe, cool community out here. And so yeah, like that was my car life for 2 weeks in Joshua Tree National Park, living and working. The town of Joshua Tree isn't that far, like it's a 20-minute drive from the campground, so, you know, if you needed supplies, water, food, you can get it there. It was a cool experience of like that kind of van life vibe, I guess, even though I didn't have a van, I had a Honda Civic. I wanted to share this story with you because it was such a special experience, and I've really grown to love this park in particular because of it. If I can get work to be more remote again, then I might do something similar like that in the very near future. But anyways, until the next video, guys, thanks for listening, thanks for letting me share this story with you, and thanks for watching.